Today, we're diving into a document that is set to redefine justice for over 1 billion people. We're talking about India's new criminal code, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS for short. This isn't just some minor update. It completely replaces a colonial-era code with an entirely new rulebook for one of the world's largest, most complex societies.
So that really brings us to the core question, right? How does a nation of 1.4 billion people even begin to create a single unified definition of what's right and what's wrong? Well, the answer is written right into the pages of this massive new legal code. So let's pull back the curtain and see what it says.
Okay, so at its heart, the BNS is designed to be the new foundation of justice. It consolidates and amends pretty much all the existing laws on criminal offenses. You can think of it as the new single source of truth for what counts as a crime in India and what the consequences are.
And its reach is, well, it's incredibly broad. As Section 1 lays out, this isn't just about crimes that happen inside India's borders. No, it applies to every single person in India, and it extends to Indian citizens literally anywhere in the world. It even covers folks on ships or aircraft registered in India. It's a truly comprehensive code of conduct.
To really get a feel for how this works, let's look at some of the most fundamental offenses, crimes against the person. Specifically, how does the law draw a line between different actions that all lead to the same tragic outcome, someone's death? The BNS starts with this really broad category called culpable homicide. You can think of this as the baseline offense for causing someone's death. Now, the two key words you really need to zero in on here are intention and knowledge. This means the act was either done with the intent to cause death, or at least with the knowledge that death was a likely result.
But here's where it gets interesting. Not all culpable homicide is considered murder. Murder, which you'll find in Section 101, is the most severe form. And what separates them? It all comes down to the degree of intention or knowledge. Basically, what was going on in the offender's head. It's not just that the act was likely to cause death, but that the offender knew the act was in the ordinary course of things sufficient to kill.
This comparison really breaks it down, doesn't it? For culpable homicide, you have the knowledge that your act is likely to cause death, but for murder, the bar is set much, much higher. The act has to be so dangerous that it will, and I'm quoting here, in all probability cause death. That little phrase is the crucial legal line in the sand.
And this example, which comes straight out of the law itself, just makes it crystal clear. Firing a loaded cannon into a crowd. I mean, that act is so inherently dangerous that death is pretty much a certainty. It doesn't even matter if the person didn't target one specific individual. The sheer recklessness and the knowledge of that probable outcome, that's what elevates the act to murder.
Now, of course, the law doesn't just protect people, it also protects our stuff and the nation itself. So let's pivot and look at offenses against property, where the BNS lays out a really clear hierarchy of crimes.
It all starts with the basics, theft. The definition here is beautifully simple and clear. It's dishonestly taking someone's movable property without their consent. That's the foundation.
Now take one step up the ladder, and you get extortion. Here, a totally new element gets introduced, fear. Instead of just sneakily taking something, the offender uses the threat of injury to actually force the victim to hand over their property. It's a whole different game.
And at the very top of this pyramid, we find robbery. Robbery is basically a supercharged version of either theft or extortion. If violence, or even just the threat of instant violence, is used during a theft, boom, it's robbery. Same goes for extortion. If the person is right there in your face, threatening immediate harm, that's also robbery. The key ingredient is that imminent danger. Beyond protecting you and your property, the BNS defines the most serious crimes of all, those against the nation itself. These are the offenses designed to protect the very structure and stability of the country. And they range from something as clear-cut as waging war to a much more nuanced crime like endangering the sovereignty or integrity of India, which, as you can imagine, is a hot topic of legal debate these days. These laws are really the legal bedrock of national security.
Okay, but here's where things get really fascinating. What happens when an act looks like a crime on the surface, but is actually justifiable? This is where the law becomes incredibly nuanced. Chapter 3 of the BNS is dedicated entirely to something called general exceptions. Basically, a whole set of circumstances where a person is legally excused for their actions. And this is absolutely fundamental to the whole code. Section 3 makes it crystal clear that you have to understand every single offense through the lens of these exceptions.
It's like there's an invisible footnote attached to every law, providing crucial context and outlining all these potential defenses.
And these exceptions cover a huge range of situations. The law recognizes, for example, that a child under 7 just doesn't have criminal intent. It makes allowances for genuine accidents or for acts someone was forced to do under threat. It even provides an exception for doing something to prevent a much bigger harm from happening. This just shows it's not a rigid system. It's really designed to account for the messiness of real life. This classic example of an accident makes the principle so easy to understand. The outcome is absolutely tragic, of course, but if the person was acting lawfully and took the right precautions, there was no criminal intent. And in the eyes of the law, if there's no criminal intent, there's no crime.
Now this one shows how complex ideas like consent and good faith can be. You've got a surgeon performing a risky operation, and they know the patient could die. But they're doing it with the patient's consent and for the patient's ultimate benefit. The intention is to save a life, not to cause harm. The law recognizes that critical difference.
Now let's zoom in on probably the most famous exception of all, the right of self-defense. The BNS lays out very specific rules for when and how a person can legally use force to protect themselves. Section 35 lays this right out loud and clear. It says that every single person has the right to defend, not just themselves, but other people too. And it's not just about protecting your body. This right also extends to protecting your property. But, and this is a big but, this right is not a blank check to do whatever you want. The law puts some really important limits on it. First, you have to have a reasonable fear of serious harm, not just some minor threat. Second, you can't claim self-defense if you had enough time to call the police for help. And maybe most crucially, your response has to be proportionate. You can only use as much force as is absolutely necessary to stop the threat, and no more.
What this all means is that in the most extreme, life-or-death situations, like if you're facing an assault you reasonably believe could kill you, or you're defending your home from a break-in in the middle of the night, the law says your right to self-defense can extend to causing the death of your attacker. It's a very, very high bar, reserved only for the absolute greatest of situations.
So, as we've seen, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita is so much more than just a list of crimes and punishments. It's this incredibly detailed framework that's designed to define harm, intent, and justification for an entire society. It's the thing that draws those fine lines between theft and robbery, between culpable homicide and murder, and between a criminal act and an excusable one.
And that really brings us to a final thought. A country's criminal code, it's like a story it tells itself about its own values, what it chooses to protect, what it chooses to punish. As India puts this foundational new law into practice, it's closing one massive chapter of its legal history and starting a brand new one. The question that's left for all of us is, what does this new story reveal about the nation's vision for justice in the 21st century?